Hi, Cheryl. Hi, Betsy.
It's been a long time.
I know we spent the whole day together, Betsy. We haven't spent this much time together since we were in Appalachia or on retreat somewhere or something.
Right.
I'm going to be right back. I need to get some water.
Ed, how are you feeling? You're muted.
That's right.
How are you feeling, Ed?
That's your left hand, right?
I'm doing well. How about you?
Oh, I'm doing fine. I haven't had any surgery, so I'm doing fine.
Well, I'm not running any marathons, but I'm still walking.
Well, that's a good thing.
Good.
How's the painting going?
What's that?
How's the painting at your house going?
Oh, goodness. That's another story. We have a guy doing some repair work in the walls where we had some staining from what looked like a leak.
Uh-huh.
So he's been here for the last 2 days. Yeah. But he was cutting into it and got it all cleaned out. And he was about ready to start restoring everything, repairing everything. But then in the rain this morning, he was working over there and felt a drip on his head. So
Oh no.
we go back to ground zero on the repair work. We got to repair the roof first to stop the
Good
leak.
heavens.
So that's what we're dealing with.
And he comes every day at 8:30, so I won't be at Bible study for a while. He shows up at 8:30. Rigo, he's a great guy though, isn't he? Rigo.
Yeah, he's good.
You need a good painter. I mean, he's stuck with us. Found a roofer for us, and
Wow.
He's been really nice.
Well, that's great. Sorry you're going through all that.
We are too.
Hello, everyone. How are you tonight?
Hi, Dina.
I have changed my scenery, my background. I'm in my office, which is kind of fun and different. That way I could get to the Lament bonfire on time if I do the Bible study from my office. So it's so different to be in the office and not at home. In some ways, I have a better chair here. I'm really glad for my office chair. It's much more comfortable than what I have at home. So maybe I should work on that. But it's really good to be with you. I told you last week that it was our last week. This week, I was off by a week. It's next week. So we've got today, and then we've got next week if you want to come back. And that would actually be better because it takes us through a certain chunk of Matthew that I think is really useful. So join me next week as well as tonight. All right, so let's go around and just check in. I'm going to do an opening prayer, and then I ask everyone to share one word for how their day has been thus far. One word. And as some of you know, I can be really strict about this one word business, but you're smart and sometimes you hyphenate words, and that's okay too. But let's try to keep it just to one word so we can check in and see how everybody's doing tonight. So let's start with prayer first. Gracious God, I thank you for this day, for what it has held, for things that have been accomplished and things that are still open and aren't going to get done today or going to get done later. I thank you for the opportunity to gather tonight for the bonfire of lament and pray your blessing upon this new and different sacramental act. I ask your blessing upon each one of us as we open up your scriptures and focus on the Gospel of Matthew together. Enliven our hearts and teach us, Lord. Amen.
Amen.
All right, Carol, what's your one word?
Busy.
Busy? Oh, exciting.
Yes.
Okay, so Robert, what's your word?
Muddy.
Muddy. Interesting. Cheryl? Oh, you're muted. Can you say it again? That's right. If you touch your space bar, sometimes that works. Oh, you're on an iPad. That's right. Let me see if I can unmute you. Hang on.
You're going to give a word?
I can't unmute you. Sorry. I'll come back to you, Cheryl. Don't. Oh, there you are. Go ahead.
Yes, it's interesting.
Interesting. Your day has been interesting. Excellent. Betsy, how about your day?
Educating.
Educating. Wow. Jan Brendel, your day?
Productive.
Nice. Glad to hear it. Ed,
Sedentary.
you did have a procedure yesterday, so probably that's good. You've been sedentary today.
Yeah, well, I did have another doctor's appointment this morning, so I went to that. But
Yeah.
that was about it.
Okay. Okay. That's all you're allowed. Susan, how are you?
Fine,
Oh,
full.
sorry. Susan Scott, and then we'll do Susan
Oh,
Beard.
I'm sorry. I forgot Susan.
I forgot we had multiples too.
Yeah.
Susan Scott,
Frustrating.
frustrating.
Oh.
I understand. I heard a little bit of it as I came in. Carolyn, how's your day been?
Zoom.
I get that. I know what that's about. Susan Beers, how's your day been?
Full.
Full.
Yeah.
Aunt Betty, how's your day been? Oh, you're muted. Hang on. Let's unmute you. Go ahead.
Sleepy.
Sleepy. Yeah, we have
Sleeping.
Sleeping day. Yeah, sounds nice. So my day has been rich. Rich. That'll be my word for today, rich. So let's get into Matthew's gospel and see what we can learn. And then next week, we'll wrap up this segment of the Bible study, which we may regroup and return to later in the summer or in the early fall. So I'm going to do share screen. And let's see. Nope, I'm not going to quite do that yet because I don't have it open. Give me just a second. I had it open earlier. There we go. There we go. You all are so very patient. Okay. And okay, now I can do it. And let me get back into Zoom. Oh, is it sharing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, like magic. Okay. So this is our meeting Jesus in Matthew. Okay, so this is a new way for me to share. There we go. Is it, how am I? For some reason, it's a little, oh, I see. Okay, I see what I have to do. Okay, so I can use these little tabs here. So I'm going to just blast us through. Close your eyes if this makes you nauseous. And my mother would be complaining right now. You're all so good. She'd be screaming at me. Okay, there we go. All the way to the end. Too far. There we go. Okay. So this is where we are today. So let's look back at our last segment. So we saw Jesus healing with 3 different stories of healing right in a row as he comes down from the Sermon on the Mount, which was quite a very full sermon, full of teaching, as we know. He comes down from the Sermon on the Mount, and as he gets back onto level land, this leprous person kneels before him and says, Lord, if you choose, you can make me clean. And boom, Jesus is reaching out to the marginalized, the outsiders, the people who you're not supposed to touch. And he touches him and he heals him and makes him clean. And then after that, there's a Roman officer. He must be dog tired. He's come down from the mount, the sermon. He heals the leper, and boom, another person comes up to him and says, can you please, I know you have authority, like I have authority over an army. I know you can do this. Please cure my servant. And Jesus does it. And so now we know that Jesus can heal a leper by touching him. We know in this story that Jesus can heal someone without touching them. And so, he's able to heal this Roman officer, the centurion's servant. And then he finally gets home to Capernaum. Maybe he's going to sleep at Peter's house. And Peter's poor mother-in-law has a fever. And maybe he's so exhausted that Jesus can't even say anything anymore. He just touches her hand. And by the act of touching her hand, without speaking, she's healed. So we have 3 different stories. Outsiders, a widow, like a woman. Maybe she's not a widow. We don't really know that. But I assume she's a widow to live with Peter in his house. So we've got an older woman, we've got a leper person, and we've got the slave or servant of a centurion. These are not like good classic Jewish folk in the synagogue or temple. These are outsiders. So the first three healing stories are three outsiders that Jesus heals. So, and then we hear that somebody wants to follow him, and he says this sort of mysterious thing about foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. And he ends up saying to somebody who wants to bury his father, follow me and let the dead bury their own dead. So these are very challenging invitations into ministry. People want to follow him, but he's saying it's going to be really hard. You're going to have to make some sacrifices. Think long and hard about it, right? He's not painting a rosy picture of what it's like to follow Jesus. So just to recap, Jesus used his healing and power to act on behalf of marginal and excluded people. He's got authority over all these things: leprosy, paralysis, fever, demons, sickness, isolation, and death. And that brings us to today, where we're looking at how Jesus's authority, which we now know is divine. But if you think about it like the original folks that are meeting Jesus in Matthew's gospel, they're puzzling it all out. They're putting it together. And so we're going to turn to two stories in Matthew's gospel tonight. We're going to skip two. We're going to do two and skip two. So we're going to do Matthew 8:18 together, if you want to look in your Bible. And we're going to do Matthew 9:18 together. And we're going to skip the two in the middle. I'm just going to tell you about them a little bit, okay? Because it's hard to really give all of this its due. So what I want to look at is, Jesus is showing that he's got power over illness and demons, and he can heal people. But in the next story, it goes a little bit off the rails, if you will. I mean, now it just really blows up into something else. So we're going to look at Matthew chapter 8, verse 18 through 27. And then we're going to come back and look at chapter 9. So here's the story. Does anyone want to volunteer to read this? Can you read this in the white text? That might not.
That's hard.
Okay. Anybody see it? Okay, good. Go for it.
If you want.
Please. I can drink some water.
I'll always volunteer to read. Now, when
Great.
Jesus saw great crowds around him, he gave orders to go over to the other side. A scribe then approached and said, "Teacher, I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." Another of his disciples said to him, "Lord, first let me go and bury my father." But Jesus said to him, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead." And when he got into the boat, his disciples followed him. A gale arose on the lake, so great that the boat was being swamped by the waves, but he was asleep. And they went and woke him up, saying, "Lord, save us, we are perishing." And he said to them, "Why are you afraid, you of little faith?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the sea, and there was a dead calm. They were amazed, saying, "What sort of man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him?"
Thank you, Carolyn. I tried to tie it into last week by having that beginning text, which we also looked at last week, remind us how Jesus said it's going to be hard if you follow him, right? And so with that cliffhanger from last week, we might wonder, if we didn't know the rest of the story, does anybody follow him? Is anybody going to do this? He's got a lot of authority, but he's just painted a really tough picture of discipleship or following. So after those very unwelcoming words, "Follow me and let the dead bury their own dead," some people follow him, which is shocking, right? Because he's saying you're going to have to make a lot of sacrifices. So they follow him when he gets into a boat. And like he promised, the going gets real tough, real fast, okay? A gale arose on the lake so great that the boat was being swamped by the waves. Jesus is asleep, okay? So how would you feel if you were the disciples and there's this terrible storm going on and you don't know how to swim, and this person who had authority to heal people isn't even there trying to comfort you, would you be, I mean, I'd be frustrated, would you?
Yeah. I think so.
Any other reactions?
I'd be frightened,
Mhm.
especially with the winds and the waves.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder how the weather forecasting was in those days, and whether this storm was a big surprise, or whether they had kind of thought there was going to be a stormy night, and Jesus said, "No, come on, let's get on the boat. I got to get out. I'm too tired." And they're like, "Okay." And then this storm came up, and wait,
Yeah.
Jesus, whoa.
Red sky at night, sailor's delight and all that. Like if they, yeah. So I wonder if they're worried. I think they're probably worried about their own lives and dying, but they might really be worried about Jesus. They have on their boat sleeping somebody that they might feel really obligated to take good care of. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just, it's save us, not just save me, right? Because can you imagine if you had Archbishop Desmond Tutu or somebody you highly revere, I don't know, some powerful person who's really important on a boat, and you would feel somewhat responsible, right? Especially if it's your boat. We don't know exactly, but we might assume it's one of the disciples' boats. So Lord, so they have to wake him up. I don't know about some of you in Maryland last night, but it was rough sleeping last night for me. It was noisy, thunder. It was a bit of a light show when I was falling asleep, but then I think it woke my cat, who was a grouch. So, you know, when you have bad weather, to be able to sleep on a boat in bad weather on a sea is amazing, isn't it? Okay.
You must have been really tired.
I know. So, you know, we believe Jesus to be fully divine and fully human, and that fully human part of him, boy, he's beat. He's beat. So he says, so he's kind of still in that mindset of follow me and let the dead bury their own dead, you know, not real gentle, not real sweet. When he says, why are you afraid, you have little faith? That doesn't seem very, we might not say that to one of our children, you know, I mean, that's not a very sweet, is it? But they're still learning about his authority. And so they, you know, he loves the disciples in Matthew's gospel, but he points out, Matthew's quick to point out that even to have a little faith is enough, you know, that he honors the disciples who do show that they have little faith. They are still the honored ones in Matthew's gospel. So then
I guess I'm a little confused as to how this is authority over creation.
So he gets up and rebuked the winds and the sea. I can't do that. Can you, Betsy?
No, I can't. But I guess the word creation got me.
Yeah, so like the wind and the waves, right? The wind, Jesus is, so this, if we think about the Trinity, creator, redeemer, sustainer, the redeemer, the word, Christ, was present at creation, right? In the beginning was the word, if we go over to John's gospel. So here we have just this little snippet in Matthew's gospel where we see Jesus as being a ruler of creation.
The other thing to remember is that for the Jewish people in particular, the sea, the waters, are a hallmark of chaos. They are uncontrollable. They're a power unto themselves. And so that's the other reason why the disciples are scared, is they're out in the middle of this lake. It's stormy, it's chaotic, and who knows what kind of terrible things happen out on the sea in the dark. So Jesus has authority over even the most scary chaos that the Hebrew people would think of whenever they think of the word chaos.
Okay, thanks.
That ties into the creation story where the breath of God moves over the waters and the chaos is ordered into creation, right? Mm-hmm. So out of the chaos is birthed creation, and the chaos is very much water, as Robert is saying. And so this may even be, in some ways, a partner, like a birth story for Jesus's power or authority is being born out into creation in a way. And, you know, the word rebuke is kind of an interesting word here, like a scolding. And so it's like, come on, you know, come on, winds and sea, knock it off. You know, I don't know what that sounds like, to rebuke the winds and the sea. And I wish we had those words of Jesus. But that makes it really clear that it's his power that does it, right?
It's kind of
Or is he
interesting.
talking to God? Is he talking to God and saying, God, come on here?
But he is God.
Yeah, but
he does talk to God the Father at times. But yeah. It's interesting, right?
yeah, I mean, can just imagine, yeah. We have a friend that was a merchant marine, and he posted on Facebook one time what it's like to be on a ship in a storm. I thought, oh my Lord, because it was just this, I can't even imagine such a thing. How horrifying. Wow.
I wonder when he became aware that he had this power.
Oh, interesting. Do you think he might not have known before he got up and did it?
I don't know. When he was tempted in the wilderness, did he know he had all that power?
Yeah, that might have been when he kind of started to figure it out as well.
Well, even in discussing the wilderness, he was tempted by demons. So you have to wonder, maybe if some of the storm was the waves were chopped up by demons or something, you know, and that would, the rebuke, that makes sense if he's rebuking.
So he rebukes, and there's a dead calm. Now, that's also an interesting language thing. Go ahead, Carolyn.
I just looked up the etymology of rebuke, and it says it comes from a Anglo-French, I'm not going to pronounce it in French, but it looks like rebuker, rebuke, I guess, to repel or beat back.
Ooh, to beat back. He beat back the winds and the sea is very active.
Wow.
Yeah. Thanks for looking that word up.
You're
Can you
welcome.
imagine Jesus saying, "Now down, down," and you know, some sort of gesticulating and, you know, very cool. So there's a dead calm. You know how that can happen. Like there's this tornado, like, you know, force, and then all of a sudden it's more quiet than you've ever known after a storm. Sometimes if it just stops abruptly, right? So quiet.
Okay,
So
so
now
hold on. What kind of boat is this? Is it a sailboat?
then they need a little wind, right? Yeah. Yep. If they don't have any wind, they're going to sit there and ponder what just happened for a long time.
They all wake up and row.
That's right. So there's a dead calm. And they sit there. Maybe they have time because the boat's not moving. And they are amazed. And they are saying to one another, what sort of a man is this, that even the winds and the sea obey him? And they might be a little frightened of him.
Yeah.
I might be a little frightened of him.
Yeah, don't turn your wrath on me, please.
Right.
Yeah.
But they all, though, here they say, Lord, save us because we're perishing.
Yep.
So, I mean, they're expecting him to act in some way. And then they're amazed that he acts in some way. You know, it's like, oh, wow, you did what we asked you to. Thank you.
I can relate to that. Yeah. Go ahead, Cheryl.
In chapter 7, it states that and when Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority. So they knew he had something more than others.
And that, you know, like, so it's sort of a layered approach in Matthew so far is what I'm understanding. He's got the intellectual authority. He understands the things of God. He understands the teachings. He understands life and how to live. And he's got authority in his teaching. Then he's got authority over leprosy and, you know, can heal bodies and fevers and things and cast out demons. Now his authority's expanded. Here's a layer of, oh, dang, is anything outside of his authority? Because it's all of creation, this most chaotic wind and wave, right?
Yeah.
So at this moment,
Mm.
I think the disciples are starting to truly absorb who Jesus might be.
Mhm.
And that the Messiah is not necessarily just somebody who's going to come and act in a certain way, but there might be something more powerful underneath even what they would expect. So we have to imagine that the disciples are piecing this together, that they, they're in the moment trying to figure out who he is, right?
Mhm.
Okay.
I know one thing you said about red sky at night, that is from Matthew.
Red sky at night?
Yeah, Matthew 16, verses 2 through 3. He answered and said to them, when it's evening, you say it'll be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it'll be foul weather today, for the sky is red and threatening.
I did not know that. I did not know that. I've heard it now that you say it, but I didn't do that deliberately. That was just
It is so cool.
a lucky thing.
In
All
spite-
right. Yeah, so red sky at night is in Matthew. You look, yeah, that's that whole thing about like,
Have no
people,
idea.
come on, you know how to predict the weather, but you don't know how to see what's happening in the world around you, right? So I'm going to get to our next story. It is very exciting. And so if you've got it in your Bible, I invite you to find it. It is 9:18 through 26. I've got it open here and I forgot to put it into the presentation today. I meant to do that, but I can read it to us.
In your
It
spare
is
time.
Chapter 9, verse 18 through 26. In fact,
Shall I?
does anybody have, what version do you have, Cheryl?
I have.
I have ESV.
Perfect. You want to read it for us?
Sure.
Great.
While he was saying these things to them, behold, the ruler came in and knelt before him, saying, my daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live. And Jesus rose and followed him with his disciples. And behold, a woman who had suffered from a discharge of blood for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his garment. For she said to herself, if I only touch his garment, I will be made well. Jesus turned and seeing her, he said, take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well. And instantly the woman was made well. And when Jesus came to the ruler's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion, he said, go away, for the girl is not dead, but sleeping. And they laughed at him. But when the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took her by the hand. And the girl arose, and the report of this went through all that district.
Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to pop the text up onto the screen so that as we want to look at it, we can. Oh, never mind. I can't do that. Okay, sorry. I thought I could, but I cannot. I can't present it and edit it at the same time, it turns out. What did you hear in that before we dive into the words? What did you hear? If you don't have it in front of you, don't worry about that. Just from the story, what's interesting to you or what are you curious about?
That she just touched the hem of his garment.
Yep.
And
his power flowed to her, you know.
Mm-hmm. Through his clothing.
Yeah, yeah.
And he knew that. He sensed that. He had the feeling of that. I was thinking it was the one where he asked who touched me, but it's a different one, I guess, a different story.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same story. It's just told differently in Matthew than it is in
gospel. Yeah.
Yeah. But he says here in the NRSV, take heart. Is that what ESV said?
Yes.
Take heart, take heart.
Take heart,
It's
daughter.
so
Your faith has made
encouraging.
you well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That is the definition of encourage. Take heart. Courage is coer in French.
Okay.
So if you are encouraging someone, you're telling them, take heart, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, coer. So we've got two stories here. What else do you react to? Someone who hasn't shared yet. If you find something you're reacting to before we jump in.
When he came to the house, he told the mourners to go away because she wasn't dead, she was sleeping, and they all laughed at him.
Mm-hmm. People laugh at Jesus, yes.
Hemorrhaging for 12 years. That's rather mind-boggling.
In the past, Jesus has always said, but don't say anything. And now the last sentence, and the report of this went out into all the land. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. News is getting out, yeah.
Yeah, good point.
Anything else?
That's what I thought. I thought when the woman approached him to touch his robe, that she had heard or knew of the things he was doing.
She must have.
Believe that it would heal.
That's a good point. I wonder which story she had heard about. I wonder if she heard about the leper or Peter's mother-in-law or the demons being cast out.
She could them.
What's that?
Could have been following them.
Mm-hmm.
But she's here with the group following him to this young girl.
Oh, but she's not supposed to be, is she?
No.
No, she's bleeding.
Right.
So in Jewish culture, she's supposed to be at home if she has an issue of blood. One of the shocking parts of the story is that it's in the gospel, in a male-dominated patriarchal culture that has problems with women's bodies. Even Matthew has this detail that is a very female problem detail that I just can't imagine how like a Victorian preacher handled this story.
He might not have.
No, yeah, right. So, when this story comes up in the lectionary, I can just imagine a bunch of really uptight preachers of old going, I don't know what to say about that. So, like really awkward. But, she is having what people called as lady troubles, for 12 years. 12 years. She is probably anorexic, or not anorexic, anemic. That's what I meant.
Seriously, yeah.
She is probably all kinds of weak. And so the fact that she's following him is pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that he encourages her. He's supposed to, if he's a good Jewish man adhering to the law, he should create a boundary between himself and her and tell her to get away.
Well, it's
would be ritually impure after her touching even the cloak of his garment, right?
Right. So he would be ritually impure because she has an issue of blood. That's the Levitical law. And those laws made sense for some reasons. I get it. But Jesus doesn't seem to really care about that at all. He doesn't care that she's having woman troubles. He says, take heart. And she, how amazing after 12 years.
And she talk about social distancing. I can imagine she's been, not connecting, being able to connect with people for all that time. Wow.
Yep.
And then to be acknowledged.
That's right.
Wow.
Yep.
And she didn't touch him. She touched not even his garment, but the fringe on his garment.
So now we know he can heal by touching. He can heal by speaking. He can heal by speaking from a distance. He can heal by not doing anything.
Right.
But being there.
It reminds me of the crumbs under the table.
Yep. The Canaanite or Syrophoenician woman. Yep. Yeah. So we'll get there. I think that's in Matthew coming up. So this enlarges who he's reaching. You've got this woman with an issue of blood for how many years?
Well,
wow,
12 years. And that's an important number in the Bible. What other number 12 do you think of in the Bible? 12.
7.
Yep.
Apostles.
The 12 tribes, the 12 disciples. So 12 is a number of fullness in the Bible. It's kind of a completion number. 12 is it means it was a long time, but it kind of has like a, I don't know. I think it's fun. We could be playful with what that number symbolizes for her. Okay.
I wonder if that's why we have 12 months in a year.
Maybe. Yep. Could have been at something else, right? So now, meanwhile, so this is a sandwich story. You got a sandwich. The woman who reaches out and touches his garment is in the middle of the sandwich, but the bread on either side is a young girl In another gospel, I believe we are told she's 12, right? And so the sandwich is very symmetrical. She's got 12 years of hemorrhaging, surrounded by on the way to a 12-year-old girl, and then now raising her from the dead.
Wow.
Okay, if that's not the most beautiful story, I don't know what is. Because you've got Jesus reaching out in love to a young girl and an older woman, and healing and raising from the dead.
Mm-hmm.
Women. These are, so I think of Luke as being the gospel that really includes women in the ministry and in the story. Matthew's doing it too. Matthew is clearly Jesus crossed some boundaries around men and women. And this was part of the astounding authority that he had, that he knew who he was and that he was here for everyone, and drew women into ministry as well. Okay, it's pretty wild, really. If you read other Near Eastern texts of the time, this is wild stuff. This is not normative. And also typically in a lot of Near Eastern writings, women are concubines or queens or prostitutes. There's a certain type of woman in stories, but these types of women in the Jesus story are really nuanced and rich and fairly empowered. She's reaching out, right? And a girl child who's sick is worth Jesus, or is dying, is worth Jesus's time. Okay, that's pretty powerful stuff.
I think it's Luke's gospel, Dina, where the words that he speaks in Aramaic are captured. He says to the little girl, Talitha cum, which in Aramaic is get up, little girl, get up. And I just would love that element of the story, because it rings so authentic that he would be speaking to her in Aramaic.
So I was once washing my hands in a New Jersey Turnpike bathroom, and there was a mom and daughter, and the daughter was just so beautiful. And we were talking a little bit and where they were going, this and that. And I said, "What's your name?" You're just, and her name is Talitha. I'll never forget it. I said, "Talitha, like Talitha cum?" And the mom says, "Yes." So, I thought that's interesting to name your little girl in Aramaic. And I can remember what she looked like. I mean, she was a beautiful child with a beautiful name. So I feel like I've met this child, although she's a little younger. So,
is there any significance that the little girl, her father was the leader of the synagogue?
Absolutely, absolutely. Why is that? Why might that be interesting to us as we study Matthew?
He spoke to the Jewish people, didn't he?
He was in conflict with many of the Jewish authorities. So this is an important person, important in the community, a leader within the religious elites, and he's coming to Jesus for help. So that's pretty impressive.
If somebody could help me, I've read ahead a bit. So someone help me remember, has he come into conflict yet in Matthew's gospel up to chapter 9?
No, I don't think so.
Right? So I think this is kind of before that. I know we right before this, we actually have some opposition. Sorry, back up to chapter 8, because I skipped those two stories. Matthew chapter 8, he starts to be opposed because the power is just so big and expanding that people are getting worried. So let's see. In Matthew 9, 1 through 17, he heals a paralytic, which is a wonderful story. And people are filled with awe. And he's walking along. Jesus is walking along, and he sees a man named Matthew. Okay, this is in the middle of 9. This is verse 9, chapter 9, verse 9. Jesus is walking along, meets a man called Matthew sitting at a tax booth, and says to him, "Follow me." And Matthew follows him. Boom. That's all it took. And Matthew's following Jesus, right? Okay. Then, as Jesus sat for dinner at Matthew's house, many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with him and his disciples. So Jesus is eating a meal with the wrong sort of people. And we might say, but this is such a nice story. Oh, really? Do you all really want me to go hang out with like I don't know, like neo-Nazi skinheads at a bar. Like, you know, just think of like, that would make me either scare you if I was safe or not, or would you want me to sit with a bunch of convicted felons all by myself? You know, you might be worried about my safety. You might be worried about my reputation. You might be wondering what kinds of things I'm interested in. You would be freaked out if I hung out with certain kinds of people, right? You would wonder. So they are not real sure about what's going on. And they say, why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners? And he says, I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners. Okay, so that's sort of like a moment of being opposed by some of the authority figures, some of the people with institutional authority. And then there's some more opposition because the disciples of John the Baptist, came to Jesus and said, why do we and the Pharisees fast often, but your disciples, you don't fast? Hi, Jan. Your disciples do not fast. And Jesus said to them, the wedding guests cannot mourn as long as the bridegroom is with them, can they? In other words, he's the party. It's time to feast. It's not time for fast. And he talks about neither is new wine put into old wineskins or the skins burst. And so new wine is put into fresh wineskins. Something new is taking shape in a container that's new. And so that's the first glimpse of opposition. So Robert, there is a touch of opposition before we get to this story, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not so much opposition that a synagogue leader doesn't want Jesus's help.
Mm-hmm.
We're kind of on a little tipping point, I think.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like it.
You know, about who's opposing Jesus and who's thinking maybe he's got more authority than anybody else.
I think it's pretty amazing. I mean, that synagogue leader actually went to him. I mean, he must have had to be really desperate.
And what did he do with his body in front of Jesus? He knelt.
He knelt. Mm-hmm.
So there's that posture again of subservience.
Right.
Which would probably upset some of the other synagogue leaders, right? The piece that I think I don't always hear clearly in this story is that he raised a dead girl. Right? Let's just pause. If you need...
Uh-oh. You're freezing, Dina.
You did say to pause.
You froze, Dina.
I'm impressed. Wonder if she can hear us.
Yeah, I'm sure she can.
Probably very frustrating for her.
I think when she hears us, she'll turn off her camera.
Yeah. That was working before.
I hear you. But
She hears
turned
us.
off my camera.
There
I
you
hear
are.
you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
I lost you all for a minute and I mourn the loss. So the most impressive part of this story for me is that Jesus brings a dead child back to life.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, there's the Lazarus story, but Jesus does not just raise Lazarus. He raises this girl and there are others.
Yeah.
But we often, because we have a name for Lazarus,
Mm-hmm.
we often, you know, might talk about that. So even before Jesus himself is raised from the dead, before he raises Lazarus from the dead, which is in John's gospel, here, right, this is pretty quick in his ministry, he's raising a child who everybody knows is dead, okay? So his authority has just, I mean, it's one thing to tell the wind to calm down. It's another thing to raise somebody from the dead.
You froze again. Oh, there you are.
No. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Really fast. I can't believe, you know, Jesus raised somebody from the dead is the big deal. Even bigger, now he's got authority over creation and life itself. His authority just way
That's
expanded,
amazing.
right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to have somebody, Robert, you know how to pray us out. Will you pray us out since I'm unstable over here? And I I so thoroughly enjoy this. So thank you for your time tonight, and we'll do it again next week. I so
Okay.
thoroughly enjoy studying Matthew with you all.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you, Dina.
Are you
Thank you.
warming up to Matthew these days?
I am.
Oh,
I
good,
am. And I'm reading ahead, and I like it.
good,
Hey.
good.
Go ahead, Robert, whenever you're ready.
Gracious God, we thank you for this time together. We thank you for your most holy word that helps us to understand who you are, how it is that we are called to be in relationship with you, who your Son is, who your Son reaches out to, and how your love is manifested through your Son to all of your people. We pray that we will take this evening's word and stories with us throughout this coming week, and that in those stories, we will feel a sense of your healing and care and compassion for us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
And if anybody wants to go deeper for further study, I would read these stories again and imagine yourself in the role. Imagine yourself as each of those bodies he healed and on the boat during the storm. Because if Jesus did that for those followers and those people, he would do that for you, right?
Mhm.
So read through those stories and understand how that might be operating in your own relationship with Jesus, and invite that kind of authority and power in, right? It's a lot of power. All right, friends, have a good night. And thanks for praying us
Thank
out,
you.
Robert. Really
You
appreciate it.
too.
Bye, everyone.
you.
Bye,
See you
Andy.
soon. We'll see you soon.